2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Welcome on.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Dodger Heads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, medium large sports network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Anthony Witrato, here to go live a few minutes early, Anthony, because we've got a little bit of breaking news. Kirby Yates, who has been rumored to the Dodgers for over a week now, is officially a Dodger. Mark Feinsand reporting it, Jeff Passan getting us the numbers. It is a 1-year, $13 million deal for Yates with a pair of $500,000 incentives at both 50 and 55 appearances. Of note, he has made 61 appearances in back-to-back seasons. We can get into Yates and some of the specifics on who this guy is as a pitcher, but give me your immediate reaction to it being official today, to the money, whatever jumps out to you most.
Yeah, I'm good with the money. I'm good with the incentive. Like you mentioned, he's probably predicted to hit that incentive. Especially given the way the Lakers. I have bad news on my mind. Given the way that the Dodgers use their bullpen or their starters. I think he's very capable of hitting that. And I think everyone should want him to hit that, right? It means he's available. I was curious if it'd be a 1 or a 2-year deal. I think given the way that signing came, like after Tanner Scott and his age, I would have bet a 1-year deal or maybe like a 1+1. But I was curious if they would give him anything more. And the fact that he was still on the market said, probably a 1-year kind of deal. So, I mean, obviously the money doesn't really matter. Like we don't even need to talk about that part of it.
Yeah.
This bullpen, man, it might be the dirtiest bullpen in the history of baseball.
Yeah.
I don't know what their run prevention numbers might end up being or whatever, but I think when you look at come the end of the season, you look at maybe like strikeouts per 9, that kind of number. Yeah. And then just on pure eye test garbage, like dirty filth kind of stuff. They might be the best ever assembled.
Look, Alex Vesia is probably like the 5th or 6th best guy in their bullpen, and he had an ERA that started with a 1 last year, to give you some context on who they've got out there. So it's a crazy deal. As Scott is pointing out in the chat, Yates has been durable. I mentioned 61 appearances each of the last 2 years. My only question for him would be, are the Dodgers really going to run him out there that many times in a season where potentially they aren't playing meaningful games all that often? I'm not saying they're going to try and mess with his incentives at all, but I just wonder if you're the Dodgers, you probably would love if his appearance number is closer to the low 50s than the high 50s, low 60s, just so that by the time you get to October, November, he's a little bit more fresh. Would be my one piece, because remember, this is a guy who is going to turn 38 in March. Yeah. So I know he's been durable the last 2 years, but something to keep in mind. The other note, just real quick, we are live. We're going to be live for the next hour plus. To keep in mind is that the Dodgers are going to have to make a corresponding move on the 40-man roster. We had joked about whether they were going to drag this out for another 2 weeks until pitchers and catchers reported, and they could make a 60-day IL move. They have not decided to do that. I imagine it wasn't in their plans at all when they came to an agreement with him a week ago. And so I imagine in the next hour, we're going to get some rumblings about, is there a trade? Is somebody been DFA'd? How the Dodgers decide to handle that. So stay tuned, folks who are joining us live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on that front. But let's get into some of the numbers. These were numbers that we've shared on this show before. He's one of 3 relievers in Major League history to have multiple seasons with 40-plus saves and an ERA below 1.25. You heard that right. Multiple seasons with 40-plus saves and an ERA below 1.25. So not small sample size seasons. He had a 1.17 ERA last year in 61 games, Anthony, a 0.83 whip. And as we're saying about the context of this bullpen, you could make a case there's 2 or 3 guys better than him in that bullpen, I think.
Absolutely. You could absolutely do that. And that is that's just guys that we know are relievers. Yeah. Like, you could end up with some rotation caliber arms in that bullpen who are also very, very dirty. And, who may thrive in those kinds of roles. We don't know yet. But yeah, I mean, there's a legitimate argument that just based on the guys who have, RP next to their name, that he just makes the top 3.
Yeah.
And on I would say on probably 25 other teams,
Yeah.
he's the guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting into some of the sabermetrics, StatCast stuff, he was in the 100th percentile last year, aka best in the league in expected ERA and expected batting average, 98th percentile in strikeout rate, 95th percentile in barrel rate. In 2023, the strikeout rate was equally awesome, but all the other stuff was kind of bad. So I guess if you were going to be somewhat cautious with Kirby Yates, it would be that 2024, he was incredible, but 2023, he was 12th percentile barrel rate, 11th percentile exit velocity, which ended up with a 3.28 ERA and 1.19 whip. However, the counter argument to the argument that I just made would be he had Tommy John surgery, missed most of 2020, 2021, and 2022. And so that 2023 year that I just described as like a quote unquote down year, maybe that was his rebound back to getting used to his arm, getting used to pitching. Yeah. And then 2024 is kind of the real Kirby Yates, I think is what the Dodgers are betting on here.
Yeah, I think so. And they rarely miss on this kind of stuff because of, I think, the sort of underlying things that they rely on.
Yeah.
And so even if he's not as good as he was last year, let's say, I think they're very confident that he is going to be a good reliever, at his floor. And so, I think that's why they go out and they make a move like this, which means they're going to have to clear space on the 40-man, which I'm sure we'll talk about also. But, I think that they're confident that he's closer to the guy he was in 24 than the guy he was prior to that, coming off the injury. So, and, it's not like these guys don't have experience in dealing with pitchers who are coming off of those kinds of injuries. Luckily, he's a couple years removed from that comeback. But, you mentioned, hoping that he's in the low 50s in terms of appearances. And I think that is ideal as long as the reason for that is just like, there's not enough impact games to be pitched in, right? Like they're hoping that it's not for other reasons.
Totally. I see some people in the chat talking about his fastball and his splitter. The splitter is the key pitch. He started throwing it in 2017. And if you go back and kind of listen to some interviews that he's had in the past, he describes his career as pre-splitter and post-splitter because that pitch has changed his life. And the reason is since he started throwing the splitter, his strikeout rate is 36%, which is the 6th best mark in all of Major League Baseball. And because of that splitter, he throws a 93-mile-an-hour fastball, Anthony, and guys were hitting 112 against it. Last year, it's worth noting, he doesn't have lefty-righty splits. Lefties hit 081 against him last year. Again, splitter thought to be one of the better pitches you can throw to a lefty, and righties hit 137. So he can get out lefties and righties. He's not dependent on velocity, which makes me feel better about signing a guy who's about to turn 38. Like if that fastball's sitting, low 93s, high 92s, I'm not sure that's going to be a massive difference in how he pitches, so long as that splitter continues to be one of the best pitches in baseball.
Yeah, for as good as that pitch is, you just kind of need the other stuff to be serviceable because you're pitching off of that anyway. I think this is a great move. I really do. It's low risk, and the upside for it is could literally mean the difference between getting stuck in the NLDS or NLCS and actually winning the World Series again.
Yeah.
Like that. I personally think that's how good this move is. The same could be said for the Tanner Scott move. Those kinds of moves, because of also how they manage the rotation, I think are this important for this kind of club.
Totally. I mean, look, we saw how important the Dodgers bullpen was last year in the World Series run, and obviously they fortify it. Think about this as like a potential bullpen. Obviously, you've got Yates, you've got Scott, the two new guys. You're mixing in Phillips, you're mixing in Trinan, you're mixing in Kopech, you're mixing in Vesia. There's your 6 guys right there who, again, Alex Vesia, sub-2 ERA on that group. And then it's sort of take your pick from there. Brusdar Graterol, once he's healthy, Edgardo Enriquez, depending on how his development looks. Anthony Bonda could be in that mix. Ryan Brazier could be in that mix. Those are 2 names we'll talk about here in a little bit. Or do you start going into the starting pitcher mix and say, well, what does Dustin May look in the bullpen? What might Nick Frasso look like in the bullpen? What might Bobby Miller look like in the bullpen? I mean, you're at that point, we're talking about who's the guy who comes into like the 6th inning, because 7, 8, and 9 are going to be locked down by dudes that on most nights nobody is touching. So the Dodgers already had the best starting rotation. They already had the best bullpen prior to this move. And to your point, they moved from, is this the best bullpen in baseball this year conversation to, is this one of the most talented bullpens we've ever seen?
Yeah, seriously. And like I said, and like you just mentioned, there could be other pieces that join that bullpen that we're not exactly sure about yet. They also have to figure on like a guy who's just going to eat innings, in those games where they need him. And so, maybe that is one of the starters. And I think there's probably been a lot of stock taking in terms of like what guys' value is, not just to this roster, but outside of the Dodgers organization.
Yeah.
Because I think more so in just clearing room on the 40-man, but just like trying to optimize the pieces that they do have.
Yep.
Like, is Dustin May valuable if you throw him in the bullpen?
Yeah.
Right. Like, do they think he thrives in that, situation? Like, there's just a lot of questions to be answered there. I personally would love to see him in the bullpen as a guy who's like a 6-out, 9-out kind of guy. And who throws regularly, not just in like, we need to eat innings here. That's really interesting to me. And, this would kind of be the year to do it too, because they are sort of redefining, I think, how bullpen management goes in this league. And I think you're going to start to see teams kind of copy this again. We've talked about like sort of how this front office has put a new spin on market inefficiencies. One of them being like actually spending money, like as absurd as that seems.
That's an inefficiency in Major League Baseball, sadly, in 2024-25.
Right. Seriously. And so, I think in sort of reconstructing the way they use a bullpen with so many dominant 1-inning guys, and obviously not every team can do that, because one, you have to get the guys who are that good to want to go play for you, and then you got to be able to afford them, and not every owner is willing to dish out that money. But that could mean doing something a little more innovative, like using a starting pitcher as a regular long inning guy.
Yeah.
Something like that. Right. So yeah, really, really interesting stuff. And to my other point, I do think that if this works out for them, I think you start to see other teams start to do this too, because I think it's in the ownership's and front office's best interest if they move away from things like saves as a way to pay guys in the bullpen, because then they get to start using guys like relief aces, and sort of the way the Dodgers deployed their guys last year, Evan Phillips in the 6th inning, or, Kopech in the 6th, those kinds of things. And not necessarily just using their best arm in the 9th inning or in a save situation, and we can be done with the whole, do you use your closer in a tie game on the road, or, like all of that kind of stuff, which is to me nauseating. But I really do think that this front office and this roster and last year's also can kind of be the start of potentially norm changing, construction and usage when it comes to relievers.
One note real quick. You mentioned Dustin May is what they decide. Keep in mind, this is his last year of team control. So I think there was probably years in the past where the Dodgers were incentivized and motivated to see like, well, can this guy be a starter? Can we stretch him out? Realistically, they're probably looking at him and saying, there's a decent chance he's not on this roster next year. And so, like, if we think where value lies in a 1-year sample size, they don't have to take the long-term view with like the asset anymore. They can just say, all right, he's here for 1 more year, then he's going to be a free agent. Let's see what we can go get out of him. And to your point, that might be a bullpen ace, but part of that conversation is going to be the one we have now, which is they've got some guys in the bullpen that they don't have flexibility with. And so part of it depends on whether you do with Dustin May is probably going to be connected to how they handle Ryan Brazier, Anthony Bonda, Michael Grove, guys like that, and what they do with those. So let's get to some super chats here. Freedom says Dodgers will be fine without Kiké, a ton of talent already. We're going to talk Kiké Hernández in a little bit. A really interesting quote from Bill Plunkett over on Dodgers territory when he was a guest on their show. He also said, my Dodgers are looking good for many years to come, guys. Dodger fan way before you young men were born. Well, thank you, Freedom. We appreciate you having you. I love it. We love the generational experience community that we have here on Dodger Heads. David says, best pitching staff, starters, and bullpen in baseball. Not even close, question mark. Yes, correct. Not even close. It's the best starting rotation. Not even close. It's the best bullpen. Not even close. And keep in mind that the team who has, the number 2 or 3 starting rotation probably doesn't have a top 5 bullpen as well. The Dodgers are far and away, I would argue, number 1 in both of those categories. The Dodgers' number 5 pitcher would be a number 1 on more than half of the league. And we just mentioned it. The Dodgers' 4th best reliever would probably close on 25 teams throughout the league. So absolutely the best pitching staff in baseball. Let's talk the move. Again, there's a chance that over the next half hour or so, we get some information about exactly what the Dodgers do here. But it's interesting, Anthony, because the Dodgers now have to open up a 40-man roster spot to make this official. By all accounts, it's about to be official. He's passed the physical. The numbers have been released, etc. And so Matt and I had a conversation on Sunday night, and I got myself a little bit of pushback, a little bit of heat for some of the ideas I threw out, because I said if the Dodgers need to trade somebody in order to make room on the 40-man roster, I put together a list of who I thought might be the most tradable guys. And again, these were guys that this is not necessarily a ranking of the worst guys on the 40-man roster. It's a ranking of the guys that, because of their optionality, whether or not they can be sent down to the minor leagues, because of the number of years of team control, because of their value in the role that they currently play, factoring all of that in, who might the Dodgers most be willing to part with, that maybe they're getting something in return for. So number 1 and 2 on my list were both relief pitchers. It was Ryan Brazier at 1-year contract remaining, $4.5 million, cannot be sent down to the minor leagues. And number 2 was the guy that everybody hated that I mentioned his name, was Anthony Bonda, who, yes, has this year and 2 more of team control, but he can't be sent down. And so for the Dodgers who like to juggle their relievers up and down throughout the minor leagues and into the major leagues to keep guys fresh, Bonda can't be one of those guys this year. Again, we probably have an answer to this question in the next 30 minutes. So we'll talk about it briefly and then maybe revisit at the end. But just gut reaction, what do you think the Dodgers do tonight to open up a spot on the 40-man?
I think for everyone, and we talked about this last week too, and at that time, the 2 guys off the top of my head that were the candidates were Brazier and Bonda. Grove's another guy.
Yep.
I think.
I'll say this real quick about Michael Grove. The reason he's not in my top 2 is not because he's a better pitcher than Brazier or Bonda. What Grove has is maybe the most valuable thing.
Yes.
He can be sent down to the minor leagues. They can option him up and down 5 times next season to keep guys fresh, to not have to lose somebody off the roster, etc. So that's why he's not number 1 and 2. He's on my list, but he wasn't 1 and 2.
Yeah. And he's not in that top 2, I think, also because they're going to move to that 6-man rotation and they're going to need some maneuverability in there. It's also why I think, even though he's in a contract season, like probably Dustin May's not the guy either.
Yeah.
Because and
he can be sent down.
And obviously with all the injury history too, like I think they want to stack those starting arms as much as they can. So I do think it's going to be a reliever. Brazier, because I think just when you look at what's out there on this team, I think for them, he's got the least value.
For the Dodgers.
Yeah. And that's not to say that he's not a good or a valuable pitcher. I just think for them, he's sort of the odd man out, and he offers them no flexibility, which is obviously something they covet, and they're going to have to covet now because they're trying to clear room. Yeah. And so I think he makes the most sense. I would imagine they're either making or fielding calls on Anthony Bonda, though. And if they get something that is kind of sexy to them, I think it's something that they don't knock off the table, right? Like I think they explore that because it solves the problem. And I think he's a guy who can actually get you something in return.
Yeah. Again, 3 years of team control to a team that doesn't really have to worry about whether or not he stays on the major league roster all that much. That's valuable to them. Again, to the Dodgers, the option year is important. So we'll revisit this later. Let me throw one more question at you. Any chance Chris Taylor's days as a Dodger are officially done? We know the only reason he's not 1 and 2 on this list is because he's basically got $20 million coming to him this season. $20 million if he's traded. I believe it's $17 million if he's not traded. So the Dodgers would owe him $17 million to play this season, and then to buy out his contract, buy out the team option for next year. It's a $3 million trade kicker as well. So any chance that in the next 24 hours Chris Taylor is gone?
Not in the next 24 hours. No.
Okay.
I think he probably opens the season with them. I think they do what they can to try to make a move with that involves him, but I think he probably opens a season with him. And then I think you end up in a situation where maybe at the deadline, it's more likely that he moves if they're still trying to move him.
Yeah.
And then they have to eat some of the money and deal like that, because I spoke about this a while back, but he's got a little bit of value like to another team because he's an expiring. And even though this isn't like the NBA where like those expiring deals are like so valuable. Yeah. It is at least something that a team knows is going to be off their books.
Yeah.
And so that makes them, that gives him a hint of value there, where it's not like he's got he's got 2 years and an option left or something like that. Then he puts him in himself in the situation where he was in last year, where he's basically untradeable.
Yeah, totally agree. If Chris Taylor's gone in the next 24 hours, I think he's just basically cut, and then they're just paying the money and eating it. That's why it seems unlikely.
It seems highly unlikely. That's not what the Dodgers' MO has been. I think they try to get something for him. And we talked about this before with this guy, is that the Dodgers are the best in baseball, I think, at taking a flyer on like a trash heap kind of guy.
Yep.
And going, well, we see this one thing here, or these one or two things here where it's possible this guy could make a turnaround. And then you get guys like Justin Turner, Chris Taylor, when he was still productive, Max Muncy, and not saying that they get that kind of return, but maybe it's something.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, keep in mind with Bonda, I didn't realize necessarily the extent of it. Prior to last season, this was a guy who was DFA'd in 2021, twice in 2022, twice in 2023, and then traded for after being DFA'd in 2024. So I know how we all feel about him right now, but keep in mind that the sample size on him is small. And I brought up a name that nobody liked, but keep in mind, Phil Bickford had a nice 50+ inning run for the Dodgers at one point after coming over in a very similar trade with a little bit of pedigree, like Bonda. And yet the second year, kind of the Cinderella, whatever, the carriage turned into a pumpkin a little bit for Phil Bickford. So we'll see. I'll say this, shout out to the chat, a little less repulsed by my Anthony Bonda ideas tonight. So maybe we've warmed up to the idea. I don't know, but I appreciate that. Let's shift gears, because again, I have a feeling we're going to be answering that question before the end of the show tonight. Thank you to everybody, by the way, jumping in live with us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. We appreciate you live here every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. We're live on Thursday nights with Scott and Blake. We're live on Sunday nights with myself and Matthew Moreno. So we appreciate you being a part of the Dodger Blue community. And if you are new, please subscribe, ring the notification bell here on YouTube. If you're a podcast person listening after the fact, we love you. We appreciate you. Go ahead, subscribe, rate, review over on Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. We would greatly appreciate it. The other big news, not big news, name that got mentioned, I think, in an interesting light, Anthony, was Kiké Hernández. I hinted at this earlier. Bill Plunkett was a guest on Dodgers Territory, and he was asked about Kiké Hernández and said this: he's not hearing Kiké Hernández's name at all from the Dodgers side of things. This is a guy that I think most Dodger fans, myself included, kind of had penciled into 60-day IL opens up in February 10th, and Kiké Hernández miraculously comes to a deal with the Dodgers on that very day. Plunkett throwing a little bit of cold water on that. Do you buy that maybe this isn't as much of a done deal as many people thought?
The one thing that I think would hold it back is that the room that they're creating when spring training starts is mostly on the pitching side.
Okay.
Maybe if not all of it on the pitching side.
Entirely pitching side.
Yeah.
You're right.
And so that makes it a little tough. And Ohtani gives them some breathing room in that he can be a position player on the roster. But they're still going to carry, obviously, the max number of pitchers because of the 6-man rotation.
Yeah.
And so It makes it a little tougher in that way, but I do not. When I heard Bill on the show and he said that, it did not signal to me that like they're out on Kiké. It just meant that I think like they're not talking about him, and it may be because they talked to him early on and we're like, look, man, we got big things planned.
Yeah.
Just hang out for a while. And I keep saying this, that Kiké Hernandez is not an everyday baseball player in the major leagues, right? Like he's not very good when you put him in that position. And I mean, and he's just okay as like even like a utility man, but he's got something going in the playoffs. And that's valuable for a team that obviously fully expects to be there in October. And they really value the flexibility he offers them in terms of like positionality.
Yeah.
Even if they say, you know what, based on who we have now, we're probably going to only end up using you at like 1.5 spots or something like that, right? But the fact that they can throw him in center, that they can throw him at second base or third base or whatever, that they like that. And so I still think that there's a place for him on this roster. It might come though, like you said, if they end up going like, we really want him back, it might mean like, okay, then you have to DFA Chris Taylor.
Right. Yeah. I said on Sunday night, like I wondered if the only way Kiké comes back is if they can get somebody to at least eat part of Chris Taylor's contract to the point that the money kind of washes. So maybe you eat all but $5 million of Chris Taylor's contract and then use that $5 million to go and sign Kiké Hernandez. That's what makes the most sense to me. And I want to defend myself a little bit from Sunday night because Matt gave me a crazy look when I said I thought that Kiké Hernandez would sign for just a little bit of money. He was coming off a 1-year, $4 million deal last year. And Matt, people in the chat are like $8 to $10 million for Kiké. So I did a little digging.
He wasn't good in the regular season.
He was, well, that was being nice, Anthony. He was actually awful in the regular season last year. But MLB Trade Rumors does their top 50 free agents. They had 18 guys after that on the honorable mention list. Kiké Hernandez was not in the top 68. The Athletic does a top 45. Kiké Hernandez not on that list. Fangraphs, he was 80th on that list, and Fangraphs has him projected as a 1-year, $5 million deal. So to me, that makes sense. Again, I understand the value he has to the Dodgers. I'm not crapping on Kiké Hernandez's value to this team. My take on all of this is I think he's way more valuable to the Dodgers than anybody else. I think everybody else that's going to go out and sign a free agent for $5-ish million needs that guy to be an everyday player. And yet here we are. And Kiké Hernandez is not really good. He's bad defensively in a few places, and he's decent in a couple others. 3 straight seasons of well below average offensive output. We're talking weighted runs created plus of 74, 72, 83 the last 3 years. And if you're a team, like basically every team other than the Dodgers, that's not guaranteed postseason moments, that can't burn a 26-man roster spot on a guy who's a black hole in the regular season and a superstar in the postseason, then you're not interested in the Kiké Hernandez business. There's only one team that should be, and that's the Dodgers. So I still think this works out. I wonder if this is a little bit of posturing by the Dodgers. Not to say that Plunkett is like misinformed or giving us bad information. I just find it hard to believe he's going to be on a team other than the Dodgers next year.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned it, like another team who signs a guy like him for $5 million, he's going to be playing. He's going to get 400 plate appearances, right?
Yeah.
Like you would think, like at least.
You're talking somewhere. Kiké will?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Dodgers are in a position where he's a luxury for them, and they can afford to pay him that kind of money and sit him and not worry about like how many at bats he's going to get. He'll be there when they look at him. The problem is, the roster spot and look, the Dodgers are the behemoth that they are financially, but like they're not in the business of just sucking down $20 million contracts.
I mean, they might be.
They might, but the reason it hasn't happened yet is because they're looking for alternatives.
I mean, because keep in mind, when we say Kirby Yates signs for 13, maybe 14 million, double that number. Like they just paid Kirby Yates they paid $26 million to have Kirby Yates for 1 year. So I'm messing with you, but I'm sure there are other teams around the league that are like, oh, they're not in the business of just gulping down $20 million contracts. It kind of feels like it,
but Kirby Yates is going to play for them, right?
100%.
Like, and so like if they did this with Chris Taylor, it'd be like you're just eating that money for a guy not to play for you.
Yeah,
that's tough. But if any team can do it, obviously it's them. And I think they're going to try to exhaust all options on that front before the end of spring training, so they can bring Kiké in and not have to worry about that other part of it. Just one less headache for him. They're finally off of the Chris Taylor, sort of albatross, not really an albatross, but just clearing that roster spot, not having to worry about Chris Taylor and where he fits in and all of that stuff. But yeah, I'm with you. I would be surprised that if Kiké Hernández is a Major League Baseball player next season, and it's not with the Dodgers, I will be shocked.
Yeah. Or at the very least, like maybe the Dodgers are like, well, maybe he just ends up on another roster to start the year. And by the time we get to June, July, you've got this team that's like, man, this guy's hitting 210 and, he can't really play shortstop well. He's pretty good at second base, pretty good at third base, like an option out in center field. Sure. And the Dodgers are like, hey, Ahmed Rosario type trade. We're interested in Kiké Hernández bringing him back. Who knows? But again, I remain confident that this is going to happen eventually, but that remains to be seen. Again, Bill Plunkett reporting that in his conversations with people inside the Dodgers, that Kiké Hernández's name has not been coming up. We got a super chat here from Phil. Phil, we appreciate you. A $20 super chat. He said, has Jim Bowden said the Dodgers should be investigated for signing Scott and Yates yet? Clearly, these deals were signed at least a year ago, right? I love it. I'm here for all of the Jim Bowden stuff. Him predicting that he's going to sign with the Padres, and then Sasaki's going to sign with the Padres, and then like 2 weeks later, accusing the Dodgers of colluding and having a deal a year ago. It's amazing reporting. I mean, like to know that it was done a year ago and then to pick the other team anyways 2 weeks beforehand. It's a absolute tour de force from our guy Jim Bowden here. I'll let Blake's words on Jim Bowden from a week or two ago stand, but I love the sentiment here, Phil. I appreciate the super chat.
Yeah, it was that guy. I've been dealing with that guy and like either knocking down things that he said or like just having to make calls to him for certain reasons, like for like 15 years, it seems like. And it's just like one of my least favorite parts of the gig when I was a beat guy in the National League Central, especially. But yeah, I mean, it was one of the most absurd things, and the fact that like there's no more accountability in like this business is just like he gets to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he gets reamed by people like us. If you missed Blake, I think it was not last Sunday, but maybe the Sunday before. The first time he took it easy on Jim Bowden, and I told you and Matt, and I was like, well, I wasn't going to let him off the hook. I was going to bring Bowden up 15 minutes later once we had Blake all lathered up, and then Blake just let it rip on Jim Bowden. So great stuff. Go find the show that me, Matt, and Blake did because he had some thoughts, and it was great. So let's get to some other stuff here, some news and notes. Anthony, Dodgers signed 29 international free agents. One of the guys reports are saying is pretty good. His name is Roki Sasaki. Apparently there's been some publicity about this guy, and some folks believe he might be decent at baseball, Anthony, but he was just one of 29 guys that the Dodgers officially signed and announced this past week. One thing that was of note to me, Anthony, before we get into some of these names, the Dodgers, some of these 29 guys, the Dodgers were actually able to slot in to the 2024 international free agent signing class. So I know there was talk of the Dodgers had the most money left, had Sasaki signed in 2024. I don't think we have specific information on which guys were part of the 2024 class. Obviously, once they're signed, it doesn't really matter, but I just wonder if the Dodgers still have some international free agent money in 2025 based on the fact that maybe I think they had 4 or 5 guys kind of get above $50,000. And so if 1 or 2 of those guys got slotted into last year, it's at least feasible that maybe they've got some money left.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I understand fully how all of that works now.
Yeah.
After some of the rules changes a couple years ago, but the way that they were trying to clear up money for Sasaki, and then he ended up taking the 6.5 as the size of the bonus. It's possible they still cleared some room there.
Yeah.
And he just didn't get it. So yeah, curious about if they did that and then how that goes about being doled out. But yeah, it's kind of cool that they can do that,
Yeah.
But yeah, that class was really good. Like they went and got the best guy in it, and then still found a way to go get like the best left-handed pitcher,
Totally.
on that board. They're just so damn good, man. This is why like so much of the talk about like the salary, and not to change the subject, but like so much of the talk about like a salary cap and blah blah. They would still be this team. They might not have all of these pieces, but they'd still be better than everybody else at all of the things.
Yeah, the Sasaki, I've said this, the Sasaki environment was a salary cap situation.
Exactly.
And the Dodgers had less money to spend than everybody else. And guess what? They still got the guy that every team wanted. I mean, that's what makes that salary cap, salary floor conversation so comical. And to your point, obviously, if there was a salary cap, the Dodgers might have less talent on the roster, which might in some ways make them less attractive because they would be less likely to win the World Series. Or you can make the case that they would have more opportunities for playing time, which is probably a barrier for them going after other guys. So it's an interesting thing. On the international free agents, real quick, you mentioned Adrian Torres was the biggest bonus they gave out, not named Sasaki, $365,000. Also got a $100,000 scholarship. He's a 17-year-old lefty from Panama. You mentioned some people have said he's the best left-handed pitcher in this class. Obviously, when you're talking about 16, 17-year-olds from all over the world, trying to guess which guys are the best or the worst. Obviously, there's some science to it, but it's less of a sure thing than maybe some of the other markets and other the rankings that you end up seeing. But he was their biggest signing. They signed a guy by the name of Samuel Savinon, a right-hander from the Dominican Republic. He got $225,000. Shai Romero, right-hander from the DR, got $200,000. Luis Luna, a shortstop from Colombia, got $140,000. They also had a couple guys in the $40,000 to $50,000 range. And then everybody else in this class was probably $10,000 or under on a signing bonus. That's the number where it doesn't matter. Anything under $10,000 does not count against your international free agent pool. One other note, a lot of people have picked up on this guy. He got a little bit of pub, but Joseph Dang, first player in Major League history signed out of South Sudan. He's like 6'6", throws mid to upper 90s. So who knows? I mean, again, he probably signed for $10,000 or less. I wouldn't go like banking on him being on a top 100 prospect list in 3 years, but it's at least a cool story.
It might
the
be
first player in Major League history from South Sudan.
Yeah, very cool. Might be a situation like you mentioned earlier where like the Lakers are just parking him with the Dodgers. Like, the Dodgers might park Kiké with another team until the trade deadline.
Yeah, totally.
The Lakers need a big.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. But yeah, look, the Dodgers have been really good at signing international free agents. We're going to talk some guys that are non-roster invitees, and some of those guys came over through the international free agent sort of pool. Andy Pages, one of the guys who's up at the major league level, one of the guys they traded and to get a bunch of this bonus pool money to go and get Roki Sasaki and others was a guy they signed a couple of years ago as well. So again, 29 international free agents in the Dodgers class this year. Roki Sasaki, obviously the headliner. Let's talk non-roster invitees. Dalton Rushing, Zaire Hope, Josue DePaula among the guys. Again, non-roster invitees are guys that are not on the 40-man roster, but who have been invited by the Dodgers to participate in spring training. Some of these guys are on minor league deals. Some of these guys are just like, you have an invite to spring training with not really any sort of guarantee of a contract. Of course, then you've got some of the top prospects as well who are under team control, unlikely to be major leaguers in some cases, but get to play with the guys, get to play in spring training games and to be around them. The names of note, technically Roki Sasaki qualifies as a non-roster invitee because he signed a minor league contract. He will quickly, once the season starts, be added to the 40-man roster and will qualify as a major league player, not a non-roster invitee. But Sasaki's on this list. The Dodgers' top pitching prospect, Jackson Ferris, on this list. Dalton Rushing, some would say the top prospect in the system, on this list. Josue DePaula and Zaire Hope, pair of 20-year-old outfielders that if you've been following prospect rankings, both guys on every top 100 list, you'll find Prospectus had him 8th and 9th in all of Major League Baseball, to give you a sense. Also, Alex Freeland, who's on every single top 100 list, a shortstop, more of a high floor than a high ceiling type, but Alex Freeland's a guy that, even last year is probably up at the Major League level for most teams, is kind of a Chris Taylor, Kiké Hernández type utility guy who's kind of a, predictable bat. Maybe he's not going to blow you away, but can kind of play all over the diamond. So that's some of the prospects. A couple more names I'll mention. Giovanni Gallegos, a veteran reliever, is with the Dodgers in camp. He'll be interesting to watch, see if he can regain. This guy was one of the better relievers in baseball at one point.
We were like, remember when they signed him and we were making jokes about like, oh yeah, like that guy will be closing game
Yeah.
2 of the NLDS, right?
Yep.
Like, I mean, I don't know now.
Yeah, he
The
probably
way
didn't,
he
he didn't
packs his
probably didn't have
bullpen.
Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates on his Dodgers bingo card. Otherwise, he might have picked somewhere else.
So it was seriously. Anyways, like a lot of these guys are interesting just because of
Yeah.
how good the top of the farm system is. Um, Rushing, I think, is the most intriguing
Yeah.
because he's the only one of these guys, like of those top prospects, that has a chance to be a Dodger this season.
Yeah, I'd say
Um,
Freeland probably too, but Rushing like an impact guy. I think Freeland could easily make the major league debut at some point. He's good enough. Whether they
I,
put him on the 40 TBD, but he's good
yeah,
enough.
and I also do wonder. Teams don't like to do this, but he is not a super high ceiling guy. So
Yeah.
your point could stick here, but teams sometimes don't like to have those guys come up to sit on the bench.
Yeah. Or to
Um,
spend an option year. I mean, we're talking about Bondo with the option year. Like if you add him to the 40 man and call him up to the major leagues, then all of a sudden one of 3 option years gets burned.
and his clock starts. If you're not going to
Yep.
use him, they don't want to start that clock either.
Yeah.
But again, he's not a super high ceiling guy, so they may be like, hey, we're going to use you in a different way than we would use a guy like Hope,
Yeah.
whenever he does come up. So, so rushing is really intriguing because I think like he probably gets a lot of at bats here, and he's probably kept until the end,
Yeah.
until it's time to break camp. I'm very, very excited to see Hope. I hope he gets a lot of time and a lot of plate appearances here because I'm excited about him. I think he has the potential to be like a serious impact kind of guy when he finally does come up.
Yeah.
He's kind of got like interesting tools to me, and his body type is a little different than we would see like in a normal
Yeah.
baseball player. But I think with the chance to be like to carry some elite tools by the time he gets developed enough to come up. So very curious to see what he can do. I really like when they do this because it means something to get guys comfortable at this level because when they finally do make their major league debut, it's not like they're a freshman in high school and they're trying to figure everything out and everything's intimidating, right? Like they still might have that sort of deer in the headlights look, but at least like, they might put a guy like him next to Mookie Betts.
Yep.
Or
100%.
right, or next to Tosk or something like
Well,
that.
yeah, maybe not Mookie Betts, the infielder. Maybe he's got to go find an outfielder to follow around.
Yeah. So maybe it's to Oscar or somebody like that, or maybe it's even just another like veteran that they know like he'd be comfortable with, like maybe it's Kiké if if he's in the clubhouse in Glendale, stuff like that. So I think it matters just because you may not see like him or DePaula in the big leagues this season. The fact that they're here as non-roster invitees. It matters. And those were always the guys I was very interested in doing stories on during camp because they have a different outlook on how things are going during spring training.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Hope and DePaul are going to be fun to watch. Like no expectations. These are guys that are going to be like single A players, maybe double A. So we're not even close to the major leagues in their cases, but that'll be fun to watch. Some other minor league names, by the way, just to throw at you. Kind of interesting guys like Austin Gauthier. If you follow Oklahoma City at all, he's sort of I can't remember if he's undrafted or late round pick that has kind of taken off. I think he was undrafted, but has made himself a nice little career and sort of risen up again, kind of like an Alex Freeland, where there's some versatility in his game, kind of just bat to ball skills, on base percentage, that kind of thing. So again, not expecting him to make the team, but he's a name to watch. Ryan Ward, probably a guy that's up at the major league level in the outfield on a lot of rosters, but in the Dodgers, sort of a power hitting corner outfield, doesn't really hit for average, not a great defender, not really a spot for him, but a name that should be interesting. And Cody Hosey, former first-round pick, all the prospect shine went way off of this guy. Last year, quietly had a pretty good season down in Oklahoma City, so can he translate some of that in spring training? I don't think those are like major league contributor types in 2025, but those could be trade pieces. Those could be guys that other teams take note of and say, hey, we're interested in him if you're not going to be using him. So just a few other names that I think are worth mentioning. I mentioned Jackson Ferris already as well. But he's just another guy, Nick Frasso, who I believe is on the 40-man roster already. Those are just two young arms that, I just want to see him in the box, against a professional major league hitter at some point this spring and say, well, let's see what that looks like.
Yeah. And I think you're right too. Like a lot of those times, they're trying to raise a guy's stock, maybe.
Yeah.
And for a team that has the kind of resources that the Dodgers do, that shouldn't be lost on anybody because, if they travel to Peoria, right, and they're playing the Mariners,
Yeah.
and they have a pitching prospect, that's a fringe prospect, and the Mariners are a great pitching development organization, and they can be like, hey, remember that guy that went 3 up, 3 down against you guys in mid-March? Like,
Yeah.
He's available, that kind of thing. So this is going to be a really interesting spring training for, I think, this team, because they are so set at every position.
Yeah.
There's essentially no position battles. I mean, you can maybe talk about second base a little bit, but I
I
think
was going to say, I think I would argue maybe center field, where it's like, can Andy Pages and James Outman, make a run compared to maybe a Haesung Kim at second base? Like, it sort of feels like those 3 guys are probably competing for one spot. That's
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. And so which means that, the veteran guys, the guys who are slotted in, they're going to walk in, do their work. And if on a day they play, they're going to get their 2 at bats and they're going to go home.
Yeah.
And so you're going to be able to see a lot of these other names, probably a lot more this spring than you would like in a different kind of season. So, one, understand that if you're traveling to go watch spring training games.
Yeah.
But also I think for the diehards, especially, like, this is a really interesting spring training where you're going to get to see some guys that you normally would not.
Yeah. And I've only gotten to go to spring training one time. I think there's a chance that some of us from Dodger heads are going to get to go down there again this season. But that's my favorite part, is getting to go see some of the young guys. It's like, look, I know what Mookie Betts looks like. I'm not really that concerned about how Mookie Betts looks, on February 28th or whatever. I almost said 29th. That would have been the 1 month. I would have been wrong on that one. But it's more like, hey, can I get some Zaire Hope at bats? Like, what's Josue DePaulo look like? Does he get a hold of one at some point this spring? That'll be, I think, the more interesting sort of things to watch and storylines. And of course, that'll be a topic on our show, storylines to watch coming up. So we'll see.
Also for guys, sorry, Jeff, not to cut you off, but
good.
Also on the pitching side, on guys who are going to be big leaguers, right? Like Gonsolin and May. Like, it'll be interesting to see what they look like.
Totally. Coming off a lot of Dodgers pitchers we haven't seen pitch in a long time. Gonsolin, Dustin May, again, Nick Frasso. He was a top prospect in the organization a year ago before he got hurt. So interesting to see kind of how that all plays out. I want to give a shout out real quick to the Dodgers owner, Mark Walter, and his family foundation, because Governor Gavin Newsom announced the creation of LA Rises, which is a recovery initiative to support rebuilding efforts in the Los Angeles area. Mark Walter, the Mark Walter Family Foundation, and the Dodgers Foundation, wait for it, provided an initial commitment of up to $100 million. So that's a big ass number, Anthony. Up to $100 million that, again, the Dodgers Foundation, Mark Walter, and his family foundation have put up. So kudos to them. Like, we could say how much money they're spending on free agents, yada, yada, yada. That's a big, big, big number. So kudos to them.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope I purposely stayed away from, like, the replies to those tweets that I saw about this, just because I just did not want to
can't
deal
help
with
themselves
if it was in there, right? Complaining that it's not enough. Like, that's a lot of money, man.
A lot of money.
It
From
is
three,
a lot of money.
basically from 2 people, from the Dodgers Foundation and then Mark Walter and his family foundation. Like,
right. And that it's meaningful. The way that organization and Mark Walter have made themselves part of the fabric of Los Angeles in the last 10 years or so has been impressive. And stuff like this is meaningful. And yes, probably, billions and billions of dollars in damage to the stuff that they're donating to, but there's also a significant portion of these areas where the people who lost things are not wealthy.
Yeah,
they did not have the $11.5 million home, or that kind of stuff, and they don't know exactly how they're going to rebuild. And so this $100 million is not nothing, and especially when it could be spread out to those kinds of families. I thought this was just incredibly commendable, thoughtful, and I think done with real purpose. You don't
Yeah.
give out 9 figures like that without really thinking about, like, where is this gonna go and how is this gonna help? You know, if
Yeah.
they go, "Hey, we're donating 5 million to this big grand fund," like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people in LA who could probably do that. There's very few who can do what he just did.
Yeah, and I'll just say this, I'm going to try and stay as unpolitical and unoffensive as possible. If your first reaction to this tweet is a political comment on Gavin Newsom, regardless of how you feel about him, like I just kind of feel bad for you. Like if you can't read a tweet where some folks put up $100 million and not make it about a politician that you do or don't like, that's crazy to me. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So let's just focus on the positive. $100 million donated and keep the rest of that nonsense out of that. So
Yeah.
off
Because
my
that money matters, and it can make a real difference.
and it will make a difference. Like it will make a difference. $100 million is no small sum. So great. Let's see. Let's get to an interesting storyline. There was speaking of Kirby Yates, who's now official. The Dodgers were connected to a different relief pitcher earlier. I guess in the last 24 hours. Former Padre Tim Hill, about to turn 35 years old. There were reports that the Dodgers were scouting him. Anthony, I mentioned some of the rankings of free agents. He was 99th on a list of Fangraphs rankings. So I imagine we're still talking major league contracts here. But for me, he had a 6 ERA with the White Sox. He goes to the Yankees, has a 2 ERA, 8 1/3 postseason innings, just 1 earned run. But here's the number that I just refuse to believe the Dodgers can get over, especially on a major league deal. He struck out 3.7 guys per 9 innings. Not a typo. 3.7 guys per 9 innings. That number went down in the postseason to 3.25 guys per 9 innings. That just, for a team that has defense like the Dodgers do and has clearly prioritized swing and miss and whiff rate and all that stuff in every guy that they've gone out and signed, I just find it hard to believe it's going to be Hill. And oh, by the way, like, are they going to go sign Hill to then have to DFA Brazier or Anthony
Right.
Bonda? That's the part that makes no sense to me. So I don't see it, but it's out there.
Yeah, I didn't get it either. Like, the first time I saw it, like, when I was scrolling, I went right. I kind of looked at it. I was like, okay, it went right by. And then, like, the third time I saw it, I was like, all right, I don't have to put brain power to this. And so, looked up a couple of things. And I was just like, I was the same as you, just like, why?
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And it's part of it's one of those things where it's like, is there an ulterior motive? Like, are the Dodgers just being inserted? I know it was one of those things where I forget where it was. I'm blanking on the name now. It wasn't Driveline, but one of those
Yeah.
performance institutes was having like a showcase day of all their different guys. This was the Max Scherzer story that came out, and it was reported Tyler Matzik, I think. Oh, the Dodgers were there. And it's like, well, yeah, the Dodgers were there when Max Scherzer was throwing. They probably just want to keep tabs on all of these guys so that if they go somewhere else, they have a sense of who they're facing. And B, if 10 guys are throwing, just reporting that they were there when Scherzer threw doesn't really mean anything, because there's a chance that there was one of the other 9 guys was who they were actually interested in, and maybe it's a minor league deal or who knows what. So
Yeah.
I take all these stories with a massive, massive, massive grain of salt.
I think right now too, it's like, it's clickbait to say that the Dodgers are in on anybody.
Yeah.
As I think that's part of it. And also, like, I think it just goes to show why they're so good at what they do is because they are knowledgeable about everyone.
Yeah.
Even a guy like this that probably has no business being on a major league roster for them right now.
Yeah.
And is kind of searching for a job, but like they're kicking the tires on a guy like that. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't mean that he's going to end up in spring training with them or something, but just the fact that they can talk knowledgeably about the guy if his name ever comes up.
Yeah. Look, this cost them a few $1,000s to send a scout to go watch 10 guys throw, put them up in a hotel room for 2 nights. Like that's what we're talking about here.
Right.
And then the Dodgers are present and all this stuff comes out of it. So there are other teams that wouldn't want to spend a couple $1,000 to the Dodgers. It doesn't even show up on their balance sheet, I'm sure.
Padres.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of, real quick, I know we've got plenty of time. I did want to go over all of I wanted to break down the Padres offseason, and we set aside an extra 25 minutes here to talk about all the things that the Padres have done. So I'm glad we got to that before question and answer here. And okay, hold on a second. Now this can't be right, Anthony. This says Elias Diaz. And that's it. That's all they. Oh no, Martin Malden. Oh no, Malden. That's a minor league deal. Elias Diaz, everybody. The Padres' only major league signing official today. So congrats to the Padres.
So bad. I'm typically not one to do this, but like it's a slow news week so far for the Dodgers until tonight. So I spent this morning kind of scrolling and looking at some of like the old, not old, but like the San Diego area sports talk radio stuff that they've clipped, some of their Padres podcast shows, just sort of listening to what they have to say, not just about the Dodgers, because they are hot when it comes to the Dodgers. Like they cannot get over it. But the attention has now turned to that ownership situation there. And especially after, I forget the widow's name of Seidler. After she accused the brothers of, essentially being racist and looking to relocate. There you go. And potentially looking to relocate the team. And then brother Seidler comes out today and they file their own kind of response to this in court, which basically says we're not racist. And she poisoned the well when it came to a big name pitcher who we were just in on and who signed with another team, Sasaki, by telling people that we were looking to move the team out of San Diego. So it is a straight up mess over there. And their talk radio guys like have content for days. Like they are going off about it. And they have come to the realization. I watched them go from like the Dodgers are killing baseball and they're making everything impossible for the Padres to we have no chance because our ownership is awful.
Yeah. Nothing burger is what I was told, though. Nothing burger. So there you go. A shout out to the Padres. Again, congrats on Elias Diaz, the only major league signing. That and their biggest minor league signing, both catchers. So they're shoring up the catcher position with guys who are in the Austin Barnes territory. Let's just say it that way. So tough stuff for the Padres. Let's get to some questions. Nothing burger, by the way, Laura, was something some Padres fans said to me that, hey, it's the ownership thing is a nothing burger, was how it was described to me in the Roki Sasaki stuff. And well, sure enough, it was not.
I mean, they're looking to sell off pieces now.
Yeah. David Garcia said the Lakers need Andrew Friedman. David, don't you dare. Andrew Friedman's a Dodger for the rest of his life. Don't you dare speak things like this out loud. All right. He's not allowed to go anywhere. Keep in mind, Shohei's got that little contract clause tied to Andrew Friedman a little bit. So David, take this back. I appreciate the super chat, David, but we can't be suggesting things like this as much as we like the Lakers here. Okay. Not like this. I don't like them that much, Anthony. I don't like the Lakers this much.
I'm not risking this Dodger run for, to just try to fix what the Lakers are right now.
Yeah. Let's get him on retainer. Maybe he can consult a little bit on the side. Like, I'm good with that. No official positions. Okay.
Who was it fairly recently, like recent memory? There was an ownership that had their front office split between their NFL franchise and their NBA franchise. Was it the Saints and Pelicans?
Oh, that sounds right, because it was when the Saints owner died, I think. And so like the organization was a mess. This sounds familiar.
Yeah. Like, I mean, can you imagine? That's wild. But yeah, I believe the ownership crossed between both organizations, and they were like maybe trying not to spend money. I forgot exactly what the situation was, the why behind it, but the front office for the Saints essentially became the front office for the Pelicans also, and they were doing both jobs.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Gotta love it. David, we appreciate the super chat. I was just mentioning that. Just joking about that. Zip Code Zero says, do you think Alex Freeland is on the 26-man roster at any point this season? This is a guy we were just talking about, Anthony. Yeah. So great question, Zip Code Zero. And thank you as always for the super chat here. Freeland's on top 100 list everywhere. I've mentioned of the guys on that list, he and Dalton Rushing are the closest to the major leagues. Obviously, if Roki Sasaki's on the list, he's not close to the major leagues. He's going to be in the major leagues, according to Andrew Friedman. He's more of a high floor than high ceiling guy. So where he falls on that list, which is typically around 50, is more a reflection, not of like how much risk he has, but is sort of best case scenario for him. Still might not be an everyday starter as much as a utility guy who starts a bunch and comes off the bench. So The conversation we were having is exactly this. Does he make the 26-man roster at some point? He would need to be added to the 40-man to do that. But do you think he's on the active roster at any point this year, Anthony?
I don't think so. I don't think it's this year. I think they have too many options in where he might play, in the spots where he might play. And I think for him to be up, like, some things would have had to gone wrong.
Yeah.
Somewhere. So I think for that reason, I hope that he's not up. And I just think that right now he's a little bit blocked, but I don't think they see him as in a situation where, like, he's going to be blocked forever. I think they see him up soon. He's probably almost surely, if he's healthy, a September call up. But like I mentioned before, these teams don't like to see guys who they really do believe will have a role in the major league clubs sometime in the near future. They don't like to bring them up and sit them.
Yeah, I'm with you. So he does not need to be added to the 40-man roster until after the season, as far as Rule 5 stuff goes. So I agree with everything Anthony says. And here's the problem for guys like Alex Freeland when you're a Dodger. Does he deserve to be in the major leagues? Yes. At some point this season, undoubtedly, yes. But because you're a Dodger and because the Dodgers have long-term, short-term goals that they can kind of operate separately at times, they're going to look at Alex Freeland and say, we kind of want to keep the 40-man roster spot as long as possible. And they're not going to want to call him up and then burn an option year as well. And so, not to mention, as you said, want to start the clock on how quickly he can get to free agency. Yeah. So I think for him, as much as he probably deserves it, barring a disaster, barring like the Dodgers losing multiple middle infielders and, Chris Taylor being gone and Kiké Hernández maybe not signing and Ha-Seong Kim not panning out, I think that's the world where he gets called up. So it's not a reflection of him, but I just don't think he makes the 26-man roster at any point because of that. So I think it's a good question, though, for sure. Let's get to some questions here. All caps questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get to as many as possible. We've got about 15 minutes left in this one. We got some good ones. We're going to go rapid fire on some of these. Eden wants to know, Anthony, next prospect to get called up and stick/be good. Roki Sasaki doesn't count. Okay, I know Baseball America and a couple other places count him as a top prospect. We had Jeff Ponce from Baseball America on the show. If you missed that, by the way, tons of good stuff in there about the Dodgers' top prospects. They've got him listed as a prospect because he's Rookie of the Year eligible. Baseball Prospectus chooses not to include him on that list. So Sasaki aside, you've got Rushing, you've got Freeland, you've got Jackson Ferris. Who's the next guy to get called up and stick/be good?
I think because the guys who might be prospects on the pitching side are hurt, like River Ryan.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Rushing.
Yeah.
I think Rushing of these guys is the only one that has real potential in 2025 to come up and stay up.
Yeah.
And I think that his bat plays at this level. They just have to find. We assume he's going to be a left fielder and a guy who like spot catches. I think that's what that's his path, and that's where he ends up.
And Keith Law, just on that note, real quick, Keith Law came out and said he thinks he can catch defensively. When I had Ponce on from Baseball America, this was interesting to me that Baseball America's rankings are not like the Baseball America guys putting their personal rankings together. That's what Keith Law does, and that's not a dig on him. He has every right to put out his own rankings. Right. Baseball America is like industry consensus, basically. It takes into account scouts. It takes into account front offices, all that kind of a thing. And they're very skeptical that Dalton Rushing can catch. Doesn't mean he won't be able to, but I think there's a wide gap on whether or not people think he can do the job or not. He has a good arm, by all accounts, not a good framer. How long that matters for to be determined. But sure. I think it's, to your point, it's going to be, if he's like a 150 game player, it's going to be 120 games in the outfield. And maybe, a year from now, he's catching on Will Smith off days kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Assuming health, like assuming Will Smith is healthy, he comes up, it's going to be primarily as an outfielder. That's what I'm guessing. Yeah. That's what my opinion, sort of my guesstimation is with that. And I think he can stick because I think that bat already is going to play.
Yeah.
And so, he could be a guy that ends up taking time from Conforto, and a guy who has the potential to be around in October.
Yeah, I think Rushing's the easy one here. I think there are a lot of other good players, but Hope DePaula, higher ranked on some lists, way further away from the major league.
Just farther
As
away.
you pointed out, kind of the pitching guys that maybe would be at the top of this list. Jackson Ferris probably not quite ready. River Ryan got a taste, but now he's hurt. Gavin Stone is going to be out for a while. I don't know if Bobby Miller still qualifies as a prospect. Probably not. So I think rushing is the answer here. Freedom with another super chat. This is one of the best stacked lineups in both starting pitching and offensive power in a very long time. In 2025, golden time to bleed blue. Anthony, it's not crazy to say the Dodgers have currently constructed one of the greatest rosters ever, period. Like when you just look top to bottom on paper, games are not played on paper. I understand that. But from a starting pitching talent, like we're talking about Yoshinobu Yamamoto, the highest paid pitcher ever, probably number 4 when everybody's healthy. We're talking about Kirby Yates, who's, one of the best pitchers and relief pitchers in Major League Baseball, might be their 3rd best relief pitcher they've got in this group. And you've still got 3 MVP candidates at the top of the lineup in Ohtani, who's the defending guy, Mookie Betts, who's won it twice, Freddie Freeman, just won World Series MVP. Like those 3 guys at the top and depth all the way down. It's a crazy lineup.
Yeah, it's loaded. It is absolutely loaded. I mean, go position by position and let's just look at power numbers. Like assuming guys are mostly healthy, catcher, 30 home run potential. First base, 30 home run potential. Second base, no, but potentially as somebody who they can end up with somebody there who has like a 400 OBP.
Yeah, it could be Tommy Edman at second base.
Yeah. Shortstop, 30 homer potential. Third base, 30 homer potential. Left field, we can have the debate on if Conforto ends up being like an everyday guy, like 150 game kind of guy.
Yeah.
I think that position has the potential for 30 home runs.
I'm way in on Conforto. So
okay.
I'm with you on that.
And yeah, I'm not down on him. I'm just throwing that caveat out there. Center field, let's call it 20 homers.
Yeah, I mean, look, Pages, it's not like Pages is incapable if he's out there.
For sure.
Obviously, Outman, again, I know if he's good enough to be playing, we've seen the power potential of James Outman. The issue hasn't necessarily been his power. It's the contact. It's the swing and miss that have been his issues. So,
for sure.
And then obviously,
and then right field, 30 homer potential.
Yeah, it's a good way of looking at
it. And then guys who are on the bench that very well could start on a number of teams, maybe not 29 others, but on a lot of teams, guys who could get regular playing time, who are just sort of buried and they are like spot guys.
Yeah. Okay, I said we were going to do this rapid fire, Anthony. We need to. You and me need to be better at rapid fire. We're going to do this. Look, you and I, we got thoughts, we got opinions, we got takes, we got words in our mouths. We're ready to go. I'll do this one. Hector says, any updates on Dave Roberts' contract extension? None yet, but nothing to be worried about. And Andy McCullough was on our show, national baseball guy for The Athletic. He thinks it's going to be the biggest contract ever given to a manager. That's probably not necessarily controversial or breaking news, other than the fact that would make it way bigger than most contracts that have ever been given out. So nothing to worry about, but no updates on that. Says, who's playing second base and right center field? They have 4 to 5 players for that role. I'll put you on the spot, Anthony. Opening day, who's at second base and who's in center field?
Opening day, I'm going Kim at second base, Edman in center field.
Okay. I'm going Edman at second base and Andy Pages in center field. I've said before, long-term, okay, with Kim, I'm very skeptical of how good he's going to be as a rookie. So good question. Look at us. That was rapid fire right there, Anthony. I like to see that. Here we go. New blue order. Percentage that Chris Taylor is still on the Dodgers at the end of the All-Star break.
That's a couple of weeks before the deadline, right?
Yeah.
I will say 60%.
Wow. I'm going to go the other way. I think it's like 30%. I don't see this being tenable. Again, another guy with no roster flexibility should the Dodgers need it. Obviously, he has versatility, so maybe it doesn't matter. J.O., if the season started today, what is the 6-man pitching rotation? Obviously, if the season started today, I assume we're projecting health into this. So Ohtani, not available. Clayton Kershaw, we all expect to sign, not available. So I'll just start with the obvious ones. Snell, Glasnow, Yamamoto. Who am I missing?
Sasaki.
Somebody else. And Sasaki, that guy, Roki Sasaki. There you go. Thank you. So those 4 locked in. Who do you have in the 5 and 6 spot?
I think Gonsolin.
Okay. I agree.
I think they go with him. And then the 6th guy is, who are my options?
May, Landon Knack, Bobby
Knack.
Miller, Kasperius, Robleski. I think Robleski's healthy.
Yeah. I think it's May.
Okay. Bobby Miller.
I wanted to say Bobby Miller, but I think it's going to be May.
I was texting with my guy Steven Nelson, and he said nobody's talking about this guy, and I know the stuff is there, and I know there's real concerns. Like my thing is I know there's concerns about what's going on up here. Talent is not the issue. We saw what Gavin Stone looked bad, came back the next year, was awesome. If Bobby Miller tweaks a couple things, gets things right.
I just think that I could see him starting in OKC first.
Yeah.
To go build back some confidence a little bit. Last season didn't end great for you. Just go get some more confidence, even if spring training is good. And then because I think they need to see what Dustin May is.
Yeah, I'm with you. And again, both those guys, spring training is going to tell you a whole lot as we get closer as far as how does Dustin May look? How does Bobby Miller look? Because if Bobby Miller is just dominating people, he's going to find his way into that rotation, plain and simple. Because the ceiling on Bobby Miller, and you can make the case for Dustin May as well, the ceiling on both of those guys is not number 4 or 5 starter. The ceiling on both those guys is like, number 2 in the case of Bobby Miller. Maybe Dustin May's a 2.5, 3, but the best case version of both guys is pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's get 2 more questions in here. Sign stealing scandal, one of my favorite names. Omedo Signs, just an absolute professional hitter. He asks, does this offseason signal a deeper bullpen philosophy shift filled with stars with no options? Vesia, the only one with options, and he's not going down. I would say, Anthony, my answer to this question would be, I don't think it's a philosophy shift in the sense of no options. I think the Dodgers are just pushing all their chips into the table and saying, like, let's go get the best players. And the bullpen was an area where they could fit absolute elite studs onto the 26-man roster without a ton of maneuvering or a ton of sort of roster cost, if you will. So I don't necessarily think they want this to be the forever model, but I think their philosophy all offseason, Anthony, has just been all in for the next 36 months.
Stack talent. Yeah. I'll try to be quick with this because I know I went a little deeper on this earlier in the show, but I think the goal here was just in terms of construction was strictly best arm available. Go get that guy.
Yeah.
And they've succeeded in building a bullpen that looks like that. There's like 5 closers up here. And I think in terms of a philosophy shift, we've sort of talked about that earlier, where we've already sort of seen it, where like there's no real closer. It's kind of, they go by matchup and they go by, what your availability is. And for this, I think that it could be a situation where you start to see the Dodgers maybe be like the spark of, maybe not the death of the closer, but like teams really being less reliant on one guy in the 9th inning.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last question. Last one, but a good one. Hepatitis C. Did you see what Hal Steinbrenner said about the Dodgers spending? Thoughts. Here's the quote, it's difficult for most of us owners to be able to do the kinds of things they're doing. We'll see if it pays off. They still have to have a season relatively injury-free for it to work out for them. But the poor Yankees saying it's really hard for us as the big bad New York Yankees to do the kind of things that the bully Dodgers are doing, Anthony. I feel it's sad, honestly.
Before he gave $100 million to a great cause, Mark Walter really should have thought about just giving some more revenue to the Yankees because they're so broke.
Yeah, I honestly, like these small market teams like the Yankees, who have at no point in their history have done what the Dodgers done. I mean, it's not the Yankees that are being compared to the Dodgers, the old Yankees compared to the new Dodgers. Like, that's definitely not what's happening now. It's not George Steinbrenner's teams that were the previous version of this. And so it's just too bad there aren't enough people in New York, that there isn't a team that like them that made the World Series last year and made a ton of money or has superstars like Aaron Judge and couldn't bring back the other guy in Juan Soto. I feel sad for the Hal Steinbrenners of the world, Anthony. So many other people living in privilege, and poor Hal has no privilege to speak of.
If only the Yankees could sign like a $300 million starting pitcher.
Yeah, imagine.
They'd be set. I mean, the one good thing that came out of that is like in the tweets that I saw about it, Yankee fans were just devouring Hal.
I love it.
Like they have no mercy for this guy right now. And you know, the Yankees really haven't done much in the offseason either. And so like his own fan base is turned on him, you know, with that quote. Like they are not happy with him. They're like, the Dodgers aren't doing anything wrong, dude. You should do the same thing. And you have done the same thing. So for you to be talking is just comical.
Yeah, and with Steve Cohen right down the street, you know, throwing
You know,
money at once.
it's hard for him to deal with that. He's the poor man in New York City now when it comes to baseball.
Totally. Okay, I said last question. I lied. We did not get a Dodgers roster move by the end of this show. Shout out to the 2,000 people with us. We're closing up shop here in just a second. So I'm going to ask you to make a prediction. The Dodgers, at some point in the next 24 hours, they're going to have to announce a 40-man roster move to make the Kirby Yates deal official. Give me a prediction for how that spot opens up.
I think we get news of a Brazier trade.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong. He could be DFA'd and then traded, or a veteran like him. Does he not? There's no way. Never mind. There's no waivers for a guy like him. He would just have to be cut, right?
Yeah. No, the DFA, I believe, then he does he not have to clear after they DFA him, or he's just gone?
That's what I was trying to think. I should have thought about this. Yeah, I mean, maybe it still gives them the 10-day window to get traded. So yeah, I think it's just they're immediately removed from the 40-man roster within 7 days. The player can be traded or placed on unconditional release waivers. So there you go.
So they can still move him if they make the move.
So they could DFA him and then still have a week to trade him off of.
They still have control over him for those 10 days. So I think it's trade though. I think that this one has probably been in the works for a little while. They're just trying to, you know, I would imagine somebody does want him. They may not want to pay it, especially now that it's the Dodgers. They may not. They're like, we're not paying him the $4.5 million. It may be a situation like that. Like I think though that's the likeliest of the situations.
Yeah, I'm with you. Because Brazier's name was mentioned by Nightingale, who, by the way, got the Yates deal right a week ago. Because his name has been included in like as a guy that's potentially being shot, that makes me think that there might be some deals, some details already having been hammered out, and just maybe some finer points. So I think it's going to be Brazier as well. That would be the name that I guess. So if you're watching us after the fact, you might have the answer to that question. But we appreciate everybody who joined us live. Again, over 2,000 people here on a Tuesday night. Thank you. If you're new, please subscribe, ring the notification bell. Check out DodgerBlue.com for all the latest Dodger Blue 1958 on social media. And again, if you're a podcast person, Apple, Spotify, Google, check out the Dodger Heads podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review. Even if you're not a podcast person, we'd greatly appreciate it on whatever listening platform you prefer. That is Anthony Witrado. I am Jeff Spiegel. Folks, enjoy the rest of your night. As always, go Dodgers. Still champs!